This is going to be a journey through all the different applications. Could you, yes, please close the door if you'd mind. Thank you very much. If you're an experienced designer, if you're an experienced print designer, for example, then this will be fairly beneficial for you because we are going to see how the tools that we use in print relate to tools we can use in animation, if you ever wanted to go animation. If you're an experienced animator, then I will show you how the tools you probably are already using for different things can be used in print design as well. The presentation is called Connecting the Dots, and we are going to explore this wonderful little guy here, which is called the pen tool. Who has used the pen tool before? Everybody in the room uses the pen tool. That's amazing. Okay, I am going to start by just creating a new Illustrator document, and this is going to go default size, and I don't really care too much about the size actually, because what I care about is these two dots that I'm about to connect, right? Now, what are these two dots? You might wonder. Do we know what these dots are? They are anchors, they are anchor points. They are effectively X and Y position coordinates in a 2D space. They are, on my document, which is currently a print document, I have my horizontal axes and my vertical axes, and on my horizontal and vertical axes, these little points describe X and Y coordinates, where this point is. So, using the pen tool, I can draw, by default, corner anchor points. So if I don't do anything with my pen tool, I just do click, clickety, click, click, click. These are corner anchor points. I drew a triangle. Not the best triangle ever. Please don't try to build your pyramids from this triangle. You could, but you'd be very disappointed, I'm afraid. Now, the pen tool is also able to convert these corner anchor points into curved anchor points. So if I hover over an anchor point with my pen tool, I can press a modifier key, which is in Illustrator's case the Alt key, that changes my pen tool to the other tool in the tool group, which is the anchor point tool. Shift-C is your shortcut for that, and it will allow you to change a corner anchor point into a curved anchor point if you're simply clicking and dragging. And I suddenly made the Acrobat logo out of a triangle very cleverly. This is how creative the good people at Adobe were when they created the Acrobat logo. They took a triangle and they just bend the curves, bend the corner anchor points, converted these corner anchor points into curved anchor points. Now, what is this now? Do we know what this is? This is a Bezier curve. It is a mathematical function that describes the bending of this line, this curve here. What it does is effectively takes this coordinate, connects it with that coordinate, using the angle and the height of this line to describe this curve. That's what we've been doing for these many, many years. We've been using these applications. We've been creating Bezier curves. I could use my pen tool to create the same Bezier curve straight away. The only thing that I will do is, instead of just simply clicking one after another, I would click and drag. Creates the Bezier curve straight away. So the next dot that I create is already shown on my screen is bending. And if I click and drag again, I'm bending that curve even further. And I click and drag, and I click and drag, and I click and drag. And finally I go to the beginning and I click and drag, and I will get this wonderful shape right there. A song from my new album, Click and Drag. If you decide to convert these anchor points back, you can of course use this anchor point tool from this tool group, or you can use the keyboard shortcut. So I'm pressing and holding the Alt key while I'm hovering over this point with my pen tool, and I can convert this back into my straight lines. Not so nice. I like the other one better. I'm more for the curves, really. So it looks this looks fun. I'm gonna go with this. It looks like a gnome shoe or something. Now if I create a shape like this in Illustrator, then of course I could change the fill color, change the stroke color, and I could start building shapes with this. Let's say that maybe I want to merge this guy with that guy. I could select both of them at the same time, and I could use my shape builder tool, for example, to hit holes in my gnome shoe, or simply merge these guys together, and suddenly I got a mutant mouse. Right? That's how imagination works. You start building shapes, creating these curves, and you end up with something like that. But for now, what I want to show you is how the same method also applies in Photoshop. Of course, if I really wanted to, I could grab this object here together with the little bunny ears. I could copy this object. I could go to Photoshop. I could create a new document if I like, and I could paste that in. Photoshop asks me, okay, how do you want to paste this in? I can create a smart object which will link the Illustrator file into Photoshop and show me the Illustrator file in Photoshop. I could bring in pixels, which is a rasterized version of the same vector object. I could bring in the path, or I can bring in an actual shape layer. Let's do an actual shape layer, and I say OK to that. And I hope, to no surprise, the actual shape appears in Photoshop as well. And I can go and use the vector tools in Photoshop, because I have, surprise, surprise, some vector tools in Photoshop, and I do have path selection and direct selection tools to manipulate the Bezier curves that I created. These are the same Bezier curves that I had in Illustrator. Right? You could argue that, oh, of course, but you could, just do the same thing in Illustrator. Why would you bring this into Photoshop? Well, the thing is that when it comes to filters and effects or compositions, I can do way more in Photoshop than I could do in Illustrator. I could animate this, I could composite this on top of another image. But the fact is that I have the same controls in Photoshop as well. So if I create a new document, and I use my pen tool in Photoshop, then I can do the same thing. I can do click, clickety, click, 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 my triangle. I press and hold the Alt key while hovering over an anchor point like that. I click and drag. I do my Acrobat logo. Right? It's the same tool, same control in Photoshop and in Illustrator. And if I take this one step further and I say, okay, surely this works in InDesign as well. So if I go to InDesign, yeah, there we go. If I go to InDesign, you will find the pen tool right there. He's there. Same shortcut even. So if I know P, pressing P in Illustrator brings me to the pen tool, and pressing P in Photoshop brings me to the pen tool, pressing P in InDesign brings me to the pen tool, and behold, I do click, clickety, come on, clickety, click, 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 triangle. I hover over, I press and hold the Alt key, I bend the Bezier curve. Acrobat logo. Right? Same controls, same tool, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. You got this covered. If you know how to use the pen tool in Photoshop, you will know how to use the pen tool in Illustrator, you will know how to use the pen tool in InDesign. I take this one step further. and I go to After Effects. I create a new composition. Let's see, leave it like that. And I go for the pen tool. It's right there. Well, the keyboard shortcut changed. Those of you who've been to the previous presentation, what is my keyboard shortcut? What does P do? Position. So I access position coordinates with P. So I would not press P in After Effects. I would press G for the pen tool. I don't know. And behold, look. I go click, clickety, click, click, triangle, yay! And I hover over, and I press and hold my Alt key, and it converts that anchor point into a curved anchor point. I got a Bezier curve right there, and suddenly I got Acrobat logo. Right? Only difference is in After Effects I can animate this. In Illustrator, in Photoshop, and in InDesign, those are vector formats. So they're just going to rasterize really nicely. It's resolution independent. I can make them as big as I need them to be. If I just go, yeah, please do rotate this for me. Let's animate the rotation just for a second. I'm going to talk about how to do this in a bit. Let's make it rotate 2 times. And let's just see what that does. Whee! Whee! Ain't that cute? Let's make it so that it rotates around its center point. That would be a bit nicer, I guess. Like that. Let's do it like that. Whee! Whee! Nice. Right. So, creating a triangle, of course, is not the peak of my creativity, as you can imagine. I was actually asked a few days back to create a logo, better said, recreate a logo for a company, and I've done this in Illustrator, and the recreation of the logo looks like this. And if I zoom in on this guy, you will find that every single one of these little shapes here is actually something that I created with the pen tool. I had to create this with the pen tool because I had to manually trace an existing logo. So they gave me a low resolution logo, 72 dpi, looked really bad. And they wanted to bring that into print. And what I had to do is, using my pen tool, I actually had to manually trace through the entire logo. It took me about 15-20 minutes. This whole thing. 15-20 minutes. The reason it takes me 15-20 minutes is because I know my pen tool and I know how to use these little commands, and that's what we are here, or that's what I'm here to show you, is how you can use these little tricks with the pen tool to create shapes like this. So I'm just going to put this aside for a second, and I'm going to go back to my pen tool, and I'm going to show you again. So if I click once, this will create a corner anchor point that will allow me to draw a straight line to the next anchor point. However, if I click and drag, that will bend the next point right there. And the next point that I would create would be a corner anchor point, like that. But if I click and drag, it will be a curved anchor point, and you can see how Illustrator is actually creating these, or connecting these dots really neatly with a curve. Now, here is the thing. Here is this point here that I want to continue. So I want this curve to go like curve and then sharp corner back to that point. And I can't seem to be able to do that because the next point that the next curve that I drag here is, as you can probably see on the screen as well, it just goes, nah, it doesn't. It wants to bend this way first. So there is an angle defined by this seesaw here that makes this point be curvy in this direction. However, because I'm really strong, I can break the seesaw into 2. All I have to do, press and hold my Alt key, hover over the seesaw, and break the seesaw. Right, and now suddenly my point bends that way. So if I go back to the first point and I click just once, close the gap, and I will have this guy here so I can use my direct selection arrow to drag that handle, and that handle will leave the other handles intact. Just make it bendy and curvy like that. Right? So one of the secrets of using the pen tool effectively is to understand that this modifier key, this Alt key, I can use even while I'm creating a shape. Right? So I could in fact create something like this. Let me go grab the pen tool, and I start by clicking and dragging, and I go and click and drag upwards, and I go and I click and drag downwards. Note how the green line, which are my smart guides, help me keep these dots in line, so I can create this little wave form like that, like that. Right, up and down creates this. How did I do this? What am I doing and how am I doing it, Illustrator users? It's Shift and? Come again?
I was slightly not watching, but Shift to get it straight.
Oh, Shift gets the line straight, but what I'm doing now is I'm effectively swapping the fill color with the stroke color. And I was drawing a shape, which looks like this, but I actually want to see the path that I'm drawing. So I'm swapping while in the shape, while the shape is still active. I have not finished this shape. The pen tool still shows me the next curve that is going to come out of this. And I'm going to swap the foreground and the background color mid-flight, if you like. So this creates this kind of wavy object.
Is it Shift X? What is the short?
Shift X is my shortcut to swap foreground and background color. Yes, indeed. Right? If I start, how do I leave this line now? Illustrator users. I could do and switch from my pen tool to another tool, but it's actually a bit easier to press Escape or Escape. Or press Command that switches you back to your previous selection cursor, and then just click once leaves the line. Right, so this is one thing that I can do if I know how to use my pen tool. Another thing that I can do if I know my pen tool is to click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. This is the same direction. Again, from my new album, click and drag. Right? So instead of alternating the directions, going up first, down second, up first, down second, I go down, 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 up, up, up. Gives me this little waveform here. It's kind of cute. Pressing and holding Shift, by the way, yes, to keep the handles straight. And then I press Command and I click away, and there is another little bendy line that I have. Or, in fact, I could do something like this. I can do click and drag, press Alt, break this, click, click and drag. Right? Still one line. I have not let go of this line. I'm still drawing the same line, actually. And I do, way, click and drag, click and drag. Let's do click and drag, and click and drag. Oops. Oh my god, I broke my toad. Let's do it like this. Right? That's a nice little boat. So I've done this in Illustrator. I could do the same in Photoshop. I could do the same in InDesign, and I could do the same in AfterEffects using the pen tool. If I can do this in Illustrator, that means that I'm able to build shapes, that I'm able to build parts. From these objects, I'm able to build compound parts, they are called. So if I take this guy, drag it into this guy. Let's just scale him down a bit so it fits in here. Let's make this guy black as well. I select both of them at the same time. I go to my shape builder tool and I delete this guy from that guy. This here now is something called a compound path. It is a combination of two closed paths, right? One inside another. The letter O would be a perfect example of a compound path. It's just two circles inside one another. If I can use this method in Illustrator, I can use the same method in Photoshop to build something called custom shapes. Photoshop users, have you used custom shapes before? No? Yeah? Okay. I'll give you an example for a custom shape. Let's say that this is my Acrobat logo. It's a really bad take of the Acrobat logo. I could be a bit more accurate with this, but let's just say that this is it. And I'm going to go for my path selection. I'm going to select the entire object, and I'm going to go edit, define custom shape. Click that. Shape name comes up. I'm going to call this Acrobat. Say OK to that. And let's just go create a new document so you can see that I'm not cheating. Let's make that into US paper size, international paper size, sorry. Let's do A4. I'm going to say OK to that. And now, if I go to my shape tool, custom shape, there is the shape drop down here. And lo and behold, at the very end of the list, I have the shape that I defined. So I can reuse this shape every single time I'm in need of this shape. I can just go in here. If it's my company's logo, you can kind of imagine how convenient that could be. If I'm pressing and holding Shift, that will maintain the proportions of this. If I'm not pressing and holding Shift, then I can draw a distorted version of this guy. Right? In Photoshop, now for the CS6, CC, CC 2015, 14, and 15 versions, you will also have fill and stroke options in Photoshop for these shapes as well. So I don't need a fill, but I need a stroke. Like that. Give me a bit bigger. Like this. Right? Really simple. Fast and effective. That's what I like. Right? Now, I take... let's say I take this logo here, and I need to do something with this in InDesign. I can just copy this if I wanted to, instead of saving this as an Illustrator file. I go to InDesign, and just as you can see it here already, I kind of gave myself away with this. I'm just going to select that, get rid of that. Come on. Yeah. I can paste it in. There you go. Right, the good news is that this is not a linked file from Illustrator. This is a shape in InDesign. So if I need to change the color of this, I don't need to go to Illustrator to change the color. If I need to adjust the curves here, I don't need to go to Illustrator. I can do that straight away from InDesign. Right? It's as simple that is. If I can use the pen tool in InDesign, that can mean that I can create text wrap. Who uses text wrap? Anyone? InDesign users in the room? Just a few? Okay. So I can use these shapes in my documents, and I'm just going to draw out a text frame here. I'm going to make it a page size text frame because I feel like covering the entire page with Latin. So you can kind of guess that I'm going to fill this with placeholder text, which gives us the good old lorem ipsum straight away. And of course, if I use an ellipse, for example, and I draw this ellipse, and I enable text wrap for that ellipse, then that will wrap the text around the ellipse. But if I know how to use the shape tool, then I can create custom text wraps. So for example, I'm going to grab an image, and I actually do have created an image of myself, just as a part of self-promotion. No, I actually didn't have any better idea. So I just took that photo. And you can see that although it's white, it's not transparent. And if I would do text wrap on this guy right now, it of course would wrap the text around the boundaries of the frame that keeps this image. And instead of doing that, I could use my pen tool. So let me just go and say no wrap on this image. And I'm going to go for my pen tool. And I'm going to say click, click and drag. I can actually move that point if I want to, but now it looks about right. It's just going to click and drag again. I'm going to break the seesaw just like I did in Illustrator. Click and drag. This one's just going to be click. And then click and drag over here. Right? So far so good. If it is. Come on. Yeah. There it is. And I want to define text wrap for that object. And I want to move this guy. Arrange. I could just, if I could read, that would be very nice. But you know what? I'm just going to use my layers panel. Yeah, that's on layer 1. I'm going to grab the text and I'm going to drag it behind, grab the image, drag it behind the text, and that's my wrap that I created using the pen tool. It's fairly simple. If you know how to use the pen tool, there are so many ways to use it. So this is Illustrator and Photoshop and InDesign. I can use the same tool in After Effects to create not only a shape, but I could create a motion path as well. So let's say for a second that I don't only want to rotate this guy, but I want to make him move. And I want to make him move along a path. So what I will do is I will grab this object and I will tell After Effects that I want to animate the position of this object. So I'm going to go and keyframe the position of this object. And I'm going to move my playhead and I'm going to move my object to the new position. And you will find that there is, in fact, 2 dots connected by a straight line with 2 handles, which gives it away as a Bezier curve. So now I can bend this curve because it's a Bezier curve. It is the same Bezier curve as it would be in Illustrator, in Photoshop, or in InDesign. It's the very same controls, it's the very same mathematical method that describes movement for this object now along that path. And not only that, but also in After Effects I can make this orient along this path. So if I just right click on the object and I go transform auto orient along the path, I say OK, and it will now do that. Right? Like this. Its orientation, of course, depends on his anchor point, it depends on the rotation of the curve, but all in all, this is the method that we use. Now, if I am not entirely satisfied with this path, I could use my pen tool and I could add new points to this curve because it is the same tool and it is the same principle, and I could convert these. I'm clicking and dragging, believe it or not. Whee! Whoa! Sound effects help. That's what I found. Right? Okay. Now what if, and this is just a wild idea, I create a path in Illustrator and I want an object to move along that path in After Effects? Well, for that, I'm going to create a new composition for us. I'm going to say OK. Let's turn this on so it's black. And I'm going to make a circle. A circle like that. Just for the ease of visibility, I'm going to make this have no stroke. See? No, I'm just kidding. It's going to have a fill color of white. So I'm going to make this go white. And say OK to that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the position properties for this. I'm going to leave it like that for now. I'm going to go back to Illustrator. And in Illustrator, I'm going to create a new document that is the same size as my composition in After Effects. My profile, therefore, in Illustrator needs to be video and film. And because I created a 720p, I'm going to go HDV, HDTV 720. It is the same setting in Illustrator as I had in After Effects. Right? The artboard size is going to be the same size as my composition. And because in Illustrator it is fairly create something like this, and I'm going to tell you that this spiral kind of thing is fairly difficult to create in After Effects. It is much easier to do this in Illustrator. I'm just going to make it a bit thicker so you can see the shape that I drew. Looks like like that. And what I'm doing is I'm simply copying all these points. I'm going back to After Effects. I'm going to enable animation for position for this object, and I'm going to paste in the same shape that I had in Illustrator into After Effects. And if I play this back, then I see my circle go in a spiral. Right? Fairly easy. I need to change the duration of this animation. And of course, as per usual, I'm going to enable motion blur for this object. And the animation I have right now, oh, it's fairly slow. Just like that. Right? So I could use any shape that I create in Illustrator as a motion path in After Effects. I can use any shape I create in InDesign. I can copy and paste that into Photoshop. I can design a custom shape in Photoshop, and so on and so forth. That's the moral of the story so far. If I know how to use the pen tool in one application, I know how to use the pen tool in all of these applications, and there is going to be at least one tool who is a trusty companion for me throughout my journey on these wonderful graphical endeavors. Okay. Questions about what we saw so far?
Say when you were making your frog face.
Yes.
If it was perfectly symmetrical, I don't know if this is possible in Illustrator, but could you live mirror what you're doing on one side, or would you just do one side and then flip and then join?
So what you're asking is effectively if I have, let's say, created one half of an object, I want to duplicate that to the other half. Well, there are a couple of ways for me to do this. I can use an effect, which is a transform effect. Let me show that first. So I'm going to use my pen tool, and I'm going to create, let's say, a straight anchor point, curve anchor point. I'm going to break that anchor point. Let's do it like that. Oops. Yeah, like that. Let's do big round, big round. Yeah, and that's where the half of this object would be. Right? And I could, of course I could duplicate this simply by alt dragging, and I could right click on this path and I could do transform, reflect. I could do a vertical reflection. I can see a preview on how that would actually look like. I can say OK to that. I could align these objects side by side, and then I could, using my direct selection tool, select these points and join them together. Oh, yeah, sorry, like that. That's one. that's 2. This is now one shape for all purposes. And another option is to use an effect, because you're asking for a live mirroring of this. Now, for that, I would go for my appearance panel, and for this object, enable distort and transform. I would say, give me 1 copies with the center point of, is that right center, and give me, let's say, reflect X, and there you go. I say OK to this. If I'm doing it like that, then of course if I go into this object and I start, let's say, using my pen tool, add a new anchor point, and I move that anchor point, then you can see how that anchor point is being moved. And now I'm creating an accidental Pokemon, I think. Right, so I could do like that. Reflects. I can apply another reflect on this whole thing if I wanted to, and that is a new effect, and it's not an edit of the original effect. So I can go add new effect, distort and transform. Transform tells me this will apply another instance of this effect. It's not going to edit the one that is already existing. Say apply new effect. I know what I'm doing. Come on, trust me, I know what I'm doing. The center point of this transformation will be bottom center. Gives me 1 new copies. Reflect Y. Show me a preview. And I get this. Right? So at this point, if I really wanted to, and this is still just this one line, right? If I really wanted to, I can add another point here. Let's move that point. And you can see how that creates a weird McDonald's logo.
And can you now make that just one shape and take off all the effects and keep it in its final?
What you want me to do here is to actually expand this object. So I go object, expand the appearance of it. So everything that is on the appearance panel will be expanded.
Okay.
Right? And now this guy here is, well, if I take a look at my layers panel, I think it's a bit more than one shape. This is going to be a group of shapes, and I have that top part and that bottom part. But if I want this to be one shape, then of course I can select, let's say, just the bottom part, move it, select both of them, and use my shape builder tool to create one compound path of all of these things.
Is there a reason why you use shape builder instead of just making a compound? I mean, it could just be
Yeah, I could have just gone create a compound path, but if I create a compound path out of this, just go object, compound path make, command and 8. See, I lose pretty much everything that this object had as far as options are concerned. This is still consists of these paths that I probably want to get rid of. When I'm using my shape builder tool, my aim is to simplify all this into one common shape. That is just the outlines of this. I could use the Pathfinder if that's your next argument. I'm new school in that sense. That ever since the shape builder came in, I just use the shape builder because for me that gives just more control over my my maneuvers with these objects. Okie doke. Okay. More questions. These were very good questions. Thank you very much. Yeah. No? It was just okay. So I could actually go and use this, for example, And by this, of course, I mean this guy here. Let me just go ahead and expand this object once more. Just give me 1 sec so I can give it a fill color. There we go. Object. Expand. Oh, still the compound path that I had before. This is the group. Yeah, okay. Let's do it like, let's do it from here. I'm just going to get rid of this transform. This is going to be very brave what I'm going to do, what I'm about to do, but I am going to not only expand this object, but I'm going to copy this object from here. I'm going to go into InDesign. Let's add a new page here. I'm going to paste this in. And let's see if I can use this shape as a frame, as a text frame for an image. Right, so if I do Command and D, and let's take something from here. Let's do this guy. Looks about right. And yeah. There you go. Almost. Would need a little more fiddle with that one. But this also means that not only can I create text wrap, I can also create frames, placeholders for images that are custom frames and placeholders. In fact, InDesign also allows, because any frame in InDesign that you drop an image in, InDesign doesn't have the images inside the document. He always creates frames. So if I just do this, I am drawing a rectangle. I let go, that's the image in the rectangle. And I can use my pen tool to redefine points on this rectangle. Let me just go add a point over there. Let's add a point over there. Right? I'm going to go for my white arrow, grab that dot over there, and just drag it in. Right? So if you know how to use the pen tool in InDesign, you will also be able to add custom frames or create custom frames for your images that you want to add to your designs. Let me just do this. Come on. Like that. Yeah, like that. Okie doke. More questions? No more questions? Oh, come on. If there are no more questions, I'm going to show you just one more thing. There is always one more, and probably during the last presentation you already saw that I'm the type of guy who just can't stop doing these kind of things. And I'm again going to be very brave, and I'm going to start Premiere, because believe it or not, there is a pen tool in Premiere as well. And the pen tool in Premiere, believe it or not, works the same way as it works in Photoshop, in Illustrator, in InDesign, or in After Effects. However, the pen tool in Premiere, given that Premiere is a video editing application, it doesn't really entirely do the same things. So I'm just going to create a new project. Display format is going to be timecode. I just going to call this Designers Fiesta 2015. And oh, already exists. Yeah, please do overwrite. This means that I've rehearsed this once already. Okay, so what I will do is I will create a new sequence. And I'll make that sequence AVC HD 720p 25 frames. Let's say OK to that. And I will go, and just for funsies really, I'm going to create a solid color in Premiere. It's called a color matte. So I'm going to create a color matte. I have to design. I have to choose a color for that. Let me choose this happy peppy lime green color. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to grab that and drag it onto my sequence like this. Voila! The green color matte. Now, there is a pen tool here in Premiere as well, as you probably would have guessed. The shortcut for it is P, so this makes After Effects the only odd one out. But unfortunately, I can't just draw straight away onto the color matte. I need an effect. I need something to host my dots. So what I will do is I will go to Effect Controls. I will open the Effect Controls for the selected clip. And I will go for Opacity. And opacity effectively controls the overall opacity for my clip by default. So if I just drag it down to 0 and I drag it back and forth between 0 and 100, you can see how I'm changing the opacity of this wonderful lime green solid. But note that there is a free Draw Bezier pen tool over here as well. And, well, if I just go there, I can do click and drag. Yeah. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, yeah, click and drag. Let's do click and drag, and let's just do click over there. Right? Look at that. I'm using the same controls in Premiere. Well, in Premiere, I could use this for quite a number of things. I could use this as a track mat on another video. I could use this to colorize an underlying track. Yeah, for quite a number of things. So just to give you a general idea of what I'm talking about, I'm going to import a video clip in here. And I'm just going to go for my public folder here, and let's do, yeah, why not? More than just Wiggle Teaser should do fine. Let's put this on top. I just need to zoom in a bit. I'm going to move this on top. I'm going to grab that footage. I'm going to drag it in. There we go. So that is really the shape on top of the footage. Right? If I want to, I can change in the opacity section the blending mode of that shape, so it blends in with my footage underneath. Okay? Is that clear? All right, well, that was my presentation of connecting the dots, how you can use the pen tool in all the major Adobe applications the same way, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your attention.